Well, I'm back, and it's a new year, so I want to try out a new format for the show. Let me know what you think of my top 10 list of D&D YouTubers who can go Welcome back to MapCrow, the RPG art show. My name is Kyle, and today we're talking about the Humble Encounter Table. In the background, you can see me drawing one of the two maps I had the extraordinary honor and pleasure of drawing for Ben Milton's Knave 2nd edition. Now, the crowdfunding campaign for this book has been closed for some time, as have pre-orders, but I'm sure when the print version is available for purchase, you will be able to find it at shop.swordfishislands.com, and if you sign up for their newsletter, I'm sure you will get an update when that becomes available. And hey, while you're signing up for email newsletters, you may as well stop by questingbeast.substack.com and sign up for Ben Milton's own newsletter, The Gladysent, which is full of links to excellent blog entries and videos and project updates and news going on in the TTRPG space, especially concerning the old school Renaissance Revolution, the OSR. And speaking of the OSR, this episode is sort of a reaction or a years-long meditation of when I first read a blog entry by Nick L.S. Wayland on his OSR blog, Papers and Pencils. The article is called Structuring Encounter Tables, and I want to talk about how this really changed my ideas around like what belongs on an encounter table and what is fun about using them. And if I am allowed just one more teensy little shout out, Monstrous is now available for PDF and pre-orders are live for the physical edition if you were so unfortunate to have missed our Kickstarter campaign last September. I'm going to have links to all the things that I'm talking about in the description below, so be sure to check that out to see all of the cool stuff that people are doing now and all of the cool stuff people have done years and years ago. I like to start seeding my encounter tables by looking at a map. Oftentimes in this hobby, overland travel is charted on a hex map. Every hex on the map will be so many miles across. Oftentimes 1, 2, 6, sometimes 12 miles across. These kinds of maps are best used in old school kinds of games where counting rations or really planning out your route because of certain time restrictions is really important. And the stories of this style of game oftentimes leverage emergent storytelling over authored storytelling. That is to say, the story is about what happens to your adventuring crew as they go about their various mercenary tasks, as opposed to something that is authored or pre-planned to have a specific climax where the player characters are sort of central to the plots that are happening. For games that are designed for this style of play, I would recommend, of course, Knave, or, the upcoming Knave 2nd edition, Shadow Dark by Kelsey Dion, or Kiern by Yochai Gal. Links in the description. Back to the map, you can see me sectioning off major areas of the map, that are divided by mountains, or in this case, fjords. And I am associating each of these different areas with two things. Mainly the faction that kind of, runs that area, and the kind of animals and beasts and monsters that you might find in them. As Baron Durop points out on his wonderful YouTube channel, Dungeon Masterpiece, geographical features and natural barriers will kind of create borders not just for wildlife, but also for political and military factions. So I have separated this map into 4 major sections, each controlled by a different faction. The southern larger fjord is having to deal with this influx of orc raiders that have come in from across the sea. Everything south of the mountains is ruled by the spiders and goblins. Up north in the glacial area, we have the recently de-thawed Fortress Unvanquishable, where Gaznak has awoken from his slumber, and the orcs are leaving the northwest alone because of all the undead and trolls that are causing problems up there. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I like to give each of my factions a kind of goal, if not at least some kind of basic desire, so I can understand why they're doing the things that they're doing. So I have this basic idea that the trolls and and the barrow wights and bog mummies and everything, they desire for all who live to be as quiet as hares and as still as stones. Dogs don't bark, birds don't sing, farm animals and farmers go about their day as quietly as possible. And I think this would really be like an interesting situation to kind of blunder into, and kind of points to an interesting set of missions to solve this problem for this area of the map. We then fill out a quick D6 table of weirdo animals and beasts that live in this area as well. Something that carries that tone, that carries that theme of silence and the imbalance of nature. Now, I'm keeping this list of beasts separate from the list of folks that might show up in these factions, like the trolls and the undead. All of them would be enumerated on a different list if I really felt like I needed to write one. And we do the same thing for the other 3 sections of the map. Each section that is ruled by a faction also has its own D6 table of beasts. And it's important for these beasts not to be something that you could think of on the fly, right? That's why you're writing it down ahead of time. You probably don't need to write down wolves or sturges. You can think of that on your own. You don't need to write that out ahead of time. That's not good prep. I don't take the time to do so in this video just because I was running out of room on my little piece of paper. But normally I would also write out the names and descriptions and, even a slight note on personality of each of the lieutenants and major figures in each of the factions. But I feel like you're getting the idea. And I know what you're thinking. Kyle, you've written 4 different encounter tables. When are you going to start talking about them? Well, these aren't the encounter tables I want to talk about. These are just the seeds. A good encounter table is going to offer more than just what you encounter. It is going to give you something as a GM to really riff on, to really kind of be able to visualize the situation and make it sound exciting. For this, I suggest using a 2d6 table because it gives us a nice bell curve and it doesn't really ask us to come up with too many different entries. If it's a straight d12 roll, then every roll is just as likely as the next. But if it's 2d6, 7 is going to be the most likely result, and the extremes of 12 and 2 are going to be the least likely results to roll. We are also going to be using 2 different colors of d6 to roll on this table because they are going to also count on 2 different other tables at the same time, all in one roll. But before that, let's talk about what is on this 2d6 table. 10 through 12 is the outside beasts. Beasts from a territory outside the area we are currently in on the hex map. Then it goes to local beasts, which is slightly more likely, local factions, which is the most likely of all, outside factions that are kind of coming into territory that doesn't belong to them. Traveling NPCs is highly unlikely, but these would be reoccurring neutral or friendly characters. And then Snake Eyes gets you a local faction leader that shows up to ruin your day. And on these next 2 tables, I am going to have just a D6 list of results for alertness and distance. The lower the number on one of these D6 tables, the worse off the PCs are, and the higher number, the better off they are. So a 1 will get you that the PCs are being searched and hunted by whatever is rolled on the encounter table, and a 6 is going to be completely off guard, resting. Similarly, our distance table will start at 1, which is going to be a surprise or an ambush, and a 6, which is going to be that, whatever shows up from the encounter table is going to be in a state of retreating or injured or just already dead when you find it. Now, because we are using one of either of the 2d6 from the encounter table roll to figure alertness and distance, that means that the things at the bottom of the encounter table are more likely to be higher alert and closer in distance than the things at the top of the encounter table. For instance, the only result on the encounter table for the local faction leader showing up is Snake Eyes, which means that this is somebody who has been searching for the PCs on high alert and has planned a surprise or ambush for them. It's going to be a sort of like a big deal if you roll Snake Eyes. And the other extreme of encounter, that being outside or local beasts coming into your way, well, those are going to be sort of safer encounters, which makes sense to me because, animals or beasts of no intelligence aren't going to hunt down and kill PCs just because they happen to be main characters in need of excitement. So let's see how this system would work. I happened to plan out the map for Knave to be 12 hexes by 8 hexes so that I could roll a d8 and a d12 to randomly generate a hex coordinate. In this case, we got the upper right corner of the map in the middle of the territory of Gaznak's army amongst the polar bears and elder horrors. Next, we roll on the encounter table with 2d6. Our sum of 8 tells us that a local beast is Alertness 5, which means returning from a task, and distance 3, nearby. Let's just use the red d6 to determine our beast as well, which would give us elder things. And immediately this scenario starts to spin up in my head where these elder things from Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness have these sort of like half-eaten, barely alive guards from Gaznak's army that were caught patrolling the northern reaches of this glacier area. And these elder things are dragging them back to their lair, perhaps for research, perhaps for lunch, who knows. But this offers the PC an opportunity to either rescue these members of Gaznak's army or follow the elder things to their lair to find what kind of, ancient cosmic technology they might still possess. And perhaps at this point I should clarify that, all of the stuff that I wrote on these encounter tables are of my own personal design. While I am kind of riffing off of some of the images and ideas I had while I was drawing the map, there is kind of no canon use for this, and you are welcome. In fact, you are encouraged to write your own encounter tables full of factions and beasts that match the kind of game that you're excited about running with your copy of Knave 2nd Edition when those become available or start arriving for backers. Matter of fact, I already have my backer PDF because I backed this project before I found out I was going to be a contributor to it. But that, I think, will do it for this first episode of 2024. I really needed a break from everything at the end of last year after I finished up Monstrous, which, by the way, is absolutely on track. Backers already have their PDF copies, and the book itself has been off to the printers for a good number of weeks at this point. Stop by thecloudcurio.com to sign up for our email newsletter so you don't miss any announcements about all of the fun stuff that we have planned for this year. We've got a new zine in the works, and we are going to also be tabling at Gen Con and Origins this summer as well. Well, I don't know when the next video is going to hit, but I hope it will be soon. So until next time, my friends, farewell. And welcome to the Aftercrow. This is where I like to thank all of my patrons for all of the support and for really, if I am to be honest, not very much payoff recently. Even over the time where I wasn't making videos, I was so busy with illustration and teaching that I really didn't have time to update the Patreon very often. I will say that right now, if you go to the Patreon, you will find an audiobook of the introduction, the first portion of Monstrous, and I'm looking forward to recording the rest of the book soon too. I already have the first core, the brutes, recorded. Might need a little bit of editing before it goes up on the Patreon feed, but that should be by the end of the month. And then, of course, John and I continue to record splat book episodes of the podcast that are available for free. We just recorded and released an episode talking about the late Janelle Jaquaiz's adventure for Dragon Quest, The Enchanted Wood, and I was really impressed with that adventure, and I hope that you have fun listening to John and I celebrate that wonderful old module. But thank you again to all of my patrons. I've had to make several expensive purchases to keep everything going here at MapPro HQ. And hopefully I might even be able to start streaming soon, but we will have to see. So until next time, I will see you until next time. I'll see you next time, I think is what I was going to say. And I'm keeping it in. I'm keeping it in.